Hi, my name is Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the baffling situation we find ourselves in the UK. The Conservatives do not have any respect for people who have not led their privileged lifestyle, which is to say the bulk of people in their own country. But on the other hand, many of those people whom they deplore think that they're brilliant and will vote for them time and time again. But first, if you'd like to see more of my videos, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, to those who keep a more careful eye on what senior politicians say, particularly when they're not in a position where they have to be heavily on message, it comes as no surprise that senior Conservatives have little interest in doing what's best for their country, and even less in doing what's best for our people. And they also have a media pact with people to support them in maintaining the illusion that they somehow do care for us. This includes Andrew Neil, who is a man who at the moment is the centre of this storm with Boris Johnson, claiming that he's going to do a robust job of interviewing the Prime Minister, should he actually get on the chair in front of him, despite the fact that Andrew Neil has worked for pro-Conservative newspapers as well as the BBC, and currently splits his time between BBC propaganda duties and being chairman of a group that owns The Spectator. For those that don't know, that is an ultra-right-wing paper that Boris Johnson once worked for. But with the general election campaign in full swing, people have been trawling through some of the things Boris Johnson has had to say about us in the past, particularly in his articles from The Spectator. And I think that's the thing. When you get a politician in a senior position, if you want to know what they really think, because most politicians never change their mind on anything ever, then just go back and see what they said before they became a senior politician, perhaps at a time when they had no ambitions of becoming a senior politician. Now, amongst them, in terms of Boris Johnson's past, is an article that he wrote as a journalist, if we can call him that, in The Spectator, in which he described the children of single mothers as ill-raised, ignorant, aggressive and illegitimate. So that's you. If you were raised in a single-parent family situation, you are ill-raised. The way you were raised was absolutely dreadful. You are ignorant, you are aggressive, apparently, and you are illegitimate. Perhaps he was speaking from experience, as all of his own children fell to that fate. After all, he hasn't raised any of them. In another attack on women, he also said that men who can't control their women are feeble. This from a man who behaves in the most appalling manner towards women. From a young age, he insisted that his girlfriends carry out a whole list of domestic duties for him, but also had to accept that he would not be faithful to them. Who now lives in number 10 with his girlfriend whilst he's still married to another woman. He suggested that mothers who have children out of wedlock should face, and I quote, destitution on a Victorian scale. That was his solution. That's what he said should happen to them. If you're a single mother, you should be thrown out on the street for the greater good. That is actually what he said. He wanted the government to take what he called vicious action against these women. When it comes to other women who are not single mothers, he refers to them only in terms of their looks. Women have no other purpose than to be attractive to him. He's made no secret of this in his articles. To which I can only wonder, why on earth do any woman wants this man to be Prime Minister? Surely he should be losing with this sort of behaviour, this sort of attitude. 50% of the voting public with this one set of statements right off the bat. Surely working class women at least should be actively voting against his party's candidates in every constituency. But it's not just women who are at best good looking enough to be further conquest for himself and at worst a drain on society, if that's how he sees them. He also takes a dim view of workers in general, men and women. And he said that the poorest 20% of society are, again quoting, chavs, losers, burglars and drug addicts. In the same article, he seemed to take exception to the fact that Labour, at the time Labour were in government, and that it was absolutely outrageous that Labour were preventing the poor people from being able to take part in fox hunting. And also that it wasn't fair that they were trying to improve their health by cutting down on smoking or eating and drinking too much. And Johnson's cabinet are towing the same line now. I mean, he's packed it, frankly, with people who always were. Some of them, like Dominic Raab and Priti Patel, were describing the workers of Britain using the most terrible insults long before Johnson encouraged them to do so. Another cabinet minister, Matt Hancock, the beleaguered health secretary trying to defend his party's destruction of the NHS, he said a few years ago that workers under 25 don't deserve the living wage because they aren't productive enough. And this was to justify the fact that the government at the time were bringing in the living wage, but they didn't want it to apply to all workers. Now, the reality, I suspect, had nothing to do with politics as such. They didn't want to bring it in at all, but thought that they could get away with it for the under 25s. Because it's an age group that don't vote in large numbers, and when they do vote, they don't really vote Conservative, do they? And I use this always as an example of why young people should vote, even if they spoil their ballot paper rather than voting for a candidate. Go in and vote. Show that you voted. Because until the young start voting in large numbers, they will never get any consideration from the government. Let politicians know your vote is up for grabs and you just watch them crawling for it by promising beneficial policies for you. When this living wage was brought in by the government that didn't really want to do it at all. Remember, this is the government that's opposed to the minimum wage, never mind the living wage. If the young were voting in large numbers, there is no way they would have excluded them. They excluded them purely because it's a demographic that don't vote. And that is why people need to vote. And the same minister also said that people who weren't earning enough from their full-time work should just go and get more work harder. He made it clear that the problem with the UK in his mind was that our workers are just lazy and should work harder, putting him in the same boat as Priti Patel and Dominic Raab, who co-authored a book, amongst others, describing the British worker as the worst idlers in the world. And when Boris Johnson's father took to the television studios to be interviewed at the end of last week, you can actually see where he gets his appalling attitudes from, but again, it's endemic within that part of the Conservative Party. So Boris Johnson's father claimed that working class people are just thick. They're just thick. I mean, as terrible a statement as that is, I had to think actually when I thought he may actually be right. You know, of all the comments to make, that one may actually be right, because quite frankly, if after this election it turns out that Boris Johnson is still Prime Minister and there's a lot of working class people have voted for him, voted for the Conservatives, then I think his father will have been right. Because how thick do you have to be to vote for people who think you are a drunkard, a thief, a drain on society, lazy and thick? So anyway, hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then also please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.